I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of the Top 10 of the 2010s. And this week, we're going to be breaking down why I think Arrival is the best sci-fi fantasy movie of the 2010s. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single 3 weeks or so is I break down a different genre of some of my top movies of that genre. In general, throughout this whole series, we look at some of the best movies of the decade. We've already done action and romance. Now we're finally ending off here with sci-fi fantasy, with next week going to be comedy. So that next week episode is going to be my honorable mentions / 10 to 7 picks of my top 10 favorite or best comedies of the decade. So that'll be, of course, a blast to make. But today's video, we're just going to be doing a real deep dive on what makes Arrival special, what makes Arrival different, what makes Arrival such a unique sci-fi fantasy movie in a decade, I think, of great sci-fi fantasy movies, and in a decade of so many great ideas and different ways to explore the medium. Why does Arrival stand out? Why does Arrival connect with me so much? And why is Arrival ultimately one of my favorite movies of the decade? So if you don't know, the movie is, the basic premise is 12 spaceships, alien spaceships, arrive on Earth and at seemingly random locations. So the US government reaches out to a professor of linguistics and tries to hires her to try to get to the aliens and try to communicate with them and ask them why they are here. And I guess a good place to start is sort of my first time watching it and what Arrival how it took over me and really impacted me, where one of those few sort of theater experiences where the credits start to roll and you're frozen and you can't move and you're sort of just locked in your seat and you don't realize what you've really experienced and you're just trying to process everything. Really just sort of a soul-shattering kind of experience. I remember it was a day where I actually hadn't gone around to seeing the movie. I was interested in seeing the movie. I saw Sicario in theaters, I saw Prisoners in theaters, so I was a fan of Denis Villeneuve already, but for some reason I just hadn't gotten around to watching it yet. When I was doing sort of my Oscar, seeing a lot of those movies, this was a day where I saw 2 movies in the same day. However, still to this day, I couldn't tell you what other movie I saw that day because Arrival was the second one I saw, and I completely forgot about that first one. Just as an impact, Arrival was just so exponentially greater. It was really similar to her, I think, a lot of ways, and I think movies that really impact you, they're really hard to explain. They are hard to understand why you connect to them so much, because the emotional impact or the intellectual impact, for me at least, leaves me void, leaves it sort of a giant hole in my soul, we'll say, that can't allow me almost to process information at once, because you know that you're emotionally affected by it. You know that you've sort of seen something that's so unique, that sort of hit such a deep resonant core with you, but for some reason you can't almost process a lot of those information at the time because it is so overwhelming. But I think for a lot of people, the emotional connection is to the main character, Louise Banks, played by Amy Adams. Now, Amy Adams is my all-time favorite actor, living, dead. I think she's the greatest actor living, dead, or greatest actor living. And I also think that she's the best actor, male or female, it doesn't matter. And personally, my favorite actor, male or female, doesn't matter. I think she can play innocent and enchanted. She can play intelligent and sort of curious in this. She can play sexy in American Hustle. She can play sort of depressive and wallowing in Sharp Objects, and she can play sort of shy and timid in Big Eyes or in Doubt. She really sort of runs the gamut, and really is, for me, is someone who's able to transform in her roles. Yet a big reason why I love Arrival, and I think why a lot of people love Arrival, is because of her performance. I personally think it is her best performance. On one hand, I think she's pulling from a lot of herself becoming a new mother, and then of course that opening scene in Arrival is sort of this heartbreaking scene that really influences the rest of the movie and sort of lingers with her character, and you're always sort of thinking that in her background because of this event that the death of her daughter, which we see in the very first scene in the movie. So I think she sort of gives a motherly aspect to the film, which is kind of a unique perspective because we don't see that many sort of female leads, especially in some of these kinds of movies. However, sci-fi is a genre with a history of great sci-fi leads, whether it be Sarah Connor or Ripley. And I think But Amy Adams is not sort of in that mold of a badass action hero. In a lot of ways, her roles, she uses that motherly aspect to try to connect to the aliens to try to give that sort of relatability, and just sort of her. She also has sort of that fierceness of, I'm the expert in this. Don't necessarily tell me what to do. Don't push me around. She doesn't have sort of this easily sort of. She is sort of combative and passionate in that sense, but then she's also incredibly intellectual and incredibly curious when she's interacting with these aliens. Oftentimes she almost seems to go into her own world, or when she's doing her own work, she sort of gets lost, and we see that on her ability to process and to just understand the information. And she's one of those great actors, which we've talked about with others, who are able to show you everything without saying anything. That her thinking, we understand what she's thinking because of her acting job. She doesn't have to say anything, she has to use a look, but we understand what she's thinking, what she's trying to say. And it's all those sort of, what I always grasp onto with actors is those subtext, the things that are not seen on screen or not said on screen, and what the actor's actually able to bring to the performance that is not necessarily on the page. And then I think she also has that humanist element, which is similar to the motherly element, but really a humanist element in regards to the pure human to alien connection, where she is trying to always connect and try to sort of separate that barrier between them and the humans. And I think she's the person that has found some success, not only because she's an incredible linguist and is working that way, but because she sort of has this fearlessness and this desire and this pull to sort of be her total self, which is why she takes off the suit in the beginning of the film and really wants to interact with the aliens as close as she can get. So you have the Amy Adams connection, but then you also have these great sci-fi elements, which makes such a great sci-fi movie, which, all those technical elements would come together. It's not necessarily the Star Wars grandiose world. It's very much grounded in reality, but there's so many creative, intelligent decisions that make it feel real, but also make it feel totally alien and strange and foreign. Starting off with that production design, just think the design of the spaceship and how it sort of moves and floats, and it's all sort of aerodynamic, and there's no wings or extra parts. It's just like one giant thing. And then when you get sucked into it, the sort of matte, sort of not glossy, sort of black rock-like structure all around, and then of course the giant viewing window, which only goes so high, so you don't know what the aliens, how tall they are, or if it's one alien, or if it's two aliens, or what the sort of relationship is, also because there's sort of that fog. And speaking of which, that another point, I guess, is the great alien design, that these aliens, once you get to see them, they're not like the traditional UFO type aliens with the big head and the small bodies and green. They're totally unique to, similar to a movie like Edge of Tomorrow, which has, I think, unique alien design. This is sort of very interesting, where it's sort of a mix of a couple things, but it's totally advanced, so it's unlike something like a squid or something that we're sort of able to relate to. So at one point it's familiar, but it's also completely alien. And then, of course, the great sound effects that, won an Oscar for, the only Oscar it won, where this is a movie where just these sort of the movements of how they sort of come in and out of the viewing room, or how they sort of shoot their squid ink. It's sort of like added with sort of the droning music of the late great Johan Johansson, adds sort of this real ethereal kind of element to it. And I think that's what Denis Villeneuve, ultimately, there's all these small great ideas and these elements, but Denis Villeneuve puts them together. He's able to get that performance out of Amy Adams. He's able to put all these great sci-fi elements together and really create an atmosphere and a tone that he's very, I think, unique at. With something like Sicario, where he's able to build suspense, or something like Prisoners in the same sort of way, or Enemy, I think he does here, and really sort of allows you to build into that atmosphere, into that world, which I think he also does well in Blade Runner 2049, a movie that didn't make this list, unfortunately. But what he does is, to build the atmosphere, is he'll often insert these shots which are maybe unnecessary, because they don't necessarily propel the story forward, but are totally necessary in terms of the experience. The whole going into the ship for the first time is sort of like this big sequence. It doesn't have to be as long as it does, but you see shots of them sort of touching the surface before they go on. The sort of slow rise of the construction lift. How we'll hold on for these long shots of them just sort of walking slowly and creeping towards it. Or just scenes where the scene's over, but they'll hold on Amy Adams' character for a little bit and do, a little bit of a sweep around her, so we get an understanding of the geography and where they are, and sort of the fogginess in the air and the atmosphere, which, of course, Bradford Young also adds to that, the great cinematographer. Now, not only that, he brings all this atmosphere and he combines all the elements. He also brings something interesting and unique, and takes Eric Heiser's script and really brings both elements out of it, which makes it for such an incredibly rewarding experience. That on one hand, it is emotionally engaging and it is really compelling as a story, but then also it's very entertaining. It's not a movie that just is sort of boring, but you feel for the characters, but you're also entertained and interested. In one half, it's a procedural. It is sort of a traditional sort of, we made contact with the aliens. You could sell that to a studio. I think that's why it did well at the box office as well, is that it's a simple premise. The aliens have come. We have a linguist. We're trying to make contact with them. And a lot of it does play out like a procedural. These sort of montages that create, showing the process of how you actually have to go through it. And so much as like The Martian or other movies that have that sort of process, I think audiences are connected to that. But then also, of course, is that the emotional element, that there's often these scenes of Louise and Jeremy Renner's character Ian sitting in a truck outside, just having sort of a humanist connection, or scenes of her waking up because of the vivid dream she's been having after the fact, Louise after the fact, or even just sort of that emotional scene at the beginning, which has flashbacks throughout the film. It's this constant character building moment, so that Louise is not just this faceless professor who is brilliant and she can do all these great things, but that actually does have an effect on her. It does have a toll on her. And then, of course, Amy Adams brings that element as well. So Amy Adams, I think the sort of the way the story is structured and some of those flashbacks, and of course how they're sort of interspersed in really a beautiful way, works, and that's sort of the more emotional humanist side, what they're able to bring. And then the sort of other elements of the story and some of the great special effects and sci-fi stuff is the great sort of more technical stuff, but Denis Villeneuve is able to really bring both of them together in such a unique way, and that's some of the stuff I really connect to. Because if you have one, like something like Blade Runner 2049, where I mostly connect to the technical elements and the appreciation of the cinematography, but less so with the emotional resonance and core of that movie, I don't like it as much as something like Arrival, which totally hits with me and overwhelms me with that emotional resonance. And the two sort of styles work hand in hand, because you have the montages of the process of making communication, and okay, we have to do this, and then we have to explain them this, and then once we explain to them this, then we can go here. That has sort of like a montage that you'd see in another sort of Martian type movie, we'll say. But then also there's these montages of these flashbacks of the beginning one, of how it sort of lingers within Louise's mind, that are also interspersed. So it doesn't feel like a separate movie. It feels very in conversation with the same movie. And then, of course, the reveal sort of at the end allows you, when you rewatch it, to completely see it in a different way. So it's also a great rewatch. And I think the sort of power of this movie, and maybe the message of the movie, was kind of resonant in a lot of ways to my experience watching it that first time. And after I was sort of so emotionally devoid and locked into the theater seat at the end, it wasn't until sort of I remember my mom picking me up and explaining it to my mom, and I really just sort of felt the emotions come over me then, and just explaining it was sort of emotionally devastating and sort of hard to get the words out, because it impacted me so much. And for a movie that is about language and trying to communicate with these aliens, in a lot of ways the movie left me with no language to say, that I really was speechless, that in a sort of an odd kind of unity, that the film can also be sort of in conversation with film and the power of film, and of how something can totally overwhelm you, and that's sort of that conversation and learning to understand. And once you understand film, therefore you start to think about film in a different way, and you learn things. And it's almost like sort of an alien thing, but when those sort of breakthroughs, we'll call them, happen, that's what, why I make these videos, why these are some of my favorite movies of the decade, why I keep on chasing sort of that sort of feeling, that sort of incredibly rewarding, emotionally void kind of a balance that you experience. That's something that is totally unique, I think, and totally impactful to the art of film. Because ultimately, this story is about, and movies in general, about relating experiences, about seeing an experience and emotionally empathizing with them, or just sort of soul searching, hopefully finding a movie that speaks to your soul in a certain way. And similar to Her, this is another movie which I've really appreciated so much, so it's kind of hard to explain what is it about it that I connect to it about it so much? Why this movie and not another movie? It's kind of hard to say. You know, like I said, it has that emotional element and has these great sci-fi elements, which I think is also a great sci-fi movie. But I think it does, unlike any others, our ability to relate, our ability to understand, to empathize, and connect to it, and use the sci-fi genre to sort of heighten that drama, and ultimately become completely entranced and totally engaged with the story and with Louise's experience. And when the end of it happens, you are just sort of totally blown away that you really want to watch it again and see it over and over again. And is a movie that I keep on coming back to, and I think I'll keep coming back to for years to come. That's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know some of your favorite sci-fi movies of the decade. That's it. Until next time, stay tuned.